There's a man who lost the presidency, collected 91 criminal charges, got raided by the FBI, and was impeached twice. A man the entire political establishment had written off not once, but 3 separate times across 5 decades.
And then he walked back into the White House anyway. Donald Trump is not a normal political story. He's something rarer, a case study in how power actually works, how it's built, destroyed, and rebuilt from nothing. So let's go through it properly, from the beginning. Trump was born in 1946 in Queens. His father, Fred, was the dominant force. A man who'd built a $300 million real estate empire across Brooklyn and Queens by treating everything like a transaction. Fred's parenting had one gear: performance or punishment. Children were expected to work in the family business, earn their own money, and prove themselves constantly. His older brother, Fred Jr., didn't want any part of it. He became an airline pilot instead. Fred Sr. called him a disappointment, cut him off. Fred Jr. died of alcoholism in his early 40s. Donald absorbed the lesson completely. At 13, Trump was sent to New York Military Academy, a place where senior cadets locked freshmen in steam rooms until they passed out. And World War II veterans didn't hesitate to use physical discipline. Fred Sr. visited every single weekend to demand a full performance report.
By the time Trump reached adulthood, 2 figures outside his family finished what his father had started. Norman Vincent Peale, the pastor who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, gave Trump his philosophical core. Fix your mind on success, never dwell on failure, and the more confidently you project winning, the more you become a winner. Trump still quotes him today, almost word for word. Roy Cohn, the attorney who ran McCarthy's witch hunts and did legal work for the New York mob, became his mentor after a federal housing discrimination lawsuit in the 1970s. The case was ugly. Of 3,700 apartments in the Trump Village complex, only 7 were occupied by black tenants. Internal documents used the code C for colored to flag and reject applications. Every other developer in that situation settled and moved on. Trump countersued for $100 million, fought for years, and ultimately negotiated a settlement with no admission of guilt, then declared victory. Cohn handed him 3 rules that never left. Always attack, never admit guilt, never concede defeat. By his mid-30s, Trump had rebuilt a derelict Midtown hotel and completed Trump Tower, 58 stories of glass in the center of Manhattan, earning $240 million on apartments alone. His father finally said publicly, "My son has surpassed me." The 1980s belonged to him. Casinos generating $15 million a week, a private airline, a yacht, a real estate empire valued at $1.5 billion. Then the 1990 recession arrived. 6 Trump businesses filed for bankruptcy. His debt hit $3.5 billion. His net worth dropped by more than half in under a year. The yacht was sold. The airline was sold. His wife Ivana discovered his affair with model Marla Maples. The divorce dragged publicly for 2 years. She walked away with $14 million, a mansion, and a Manhattan apartment. By any rational measure, it was over. Here's the part people always miss about the comeback. Trump didn't just survive the collapse. He reinvented what he was. He stopped being primarily a developer. What he built instead was something more elegant, a licensing empire. Other businessmen paid to put his name on their buildings. The Trump brand, plastered across skylines from Manhattan to Istanbul, was later estimated to be worth $3.3 billion in licensing value alone. He never owned most of what bore his name. He didn't need to. The media strategy was equally calculated. Trump personally called major newspapers pretending to be company insiders. He called Forbes under the fake name John Barron, a fictional VP, to inflate his wealth estimates. The magazine listed him at $100 million, when his actual net worth may have been closer to $5 million. He later named his youngest son Barron. The Forbes 400 treated every leak as gospel. In The Art of the Deal, he called this truthful hyperbole, playing with people's fantasies. A little exaggeration never hurt anyone.
Warren Buffett, who openly supported Hillary Clinton in 2016, acknowledged it anyway. Trump was genuinely exceptional at licensing and brand promotion. The political ambitions had been there since his 30s. He floated a presidential run in 1987, then again in 2000. Each time, the media said he was just farming attention, selling books. They weren't entirely wrong, but they missed the through line.
In 2011, Trump seized on the birther conspiracy, the claim that Obama had been born in Kenya and was ineligible to serve. He never claimed certainty. He just asked questions. Classic conspiratorial mechanics. It dominated news cycles for months. By 2015, when he announced he was actually running, almost nobody took it seriously. Obama roasted him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Polls showed Clinton with a 90-1 advantage. But Trump had something the polls couldn't capture. Tens of millions of Americans, working class, rural, ignored by coastal media, who felt like the country had stopped speaking their language. Here's something the media never quite figured out about Trump. Attacking him doesn't weaken him, it feeds him. Counter-propaganda, where your entire strategy is reactively tearing down your opponent, backfires when the underlying problems he's naming never actually get solved. Every hit piece, every late-night monologue, every outraged op-ed made Trump more searched than Clinton throughout the entire 2016 campaign. He won. 7 swing states. Done. His first words to the crowd? "Thank you. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Complicated business." That's pure Trump. He could have walked out earlier. He waited for the numbers. Even in triumph, the discipline held. Term 1 was a mixed record, and it's worth being direct about it. The wall got roughly 10% longer. Mexico paid nothing. The healthcare replacement never materialized. The promised job surge was real until COVID scrambled everything. The national debt grew. Were there genuine wins? His supporters will list them accurately, but the overall picture of Term 1 is a man who overpromised on specifics while delivering on atmosphere. What wasn't standard was January 6th. After losing the 2020 election by 7 million popular votes, having spent months before the results even came in claiming any loss would be fraudulent, the rally happened, the Capitol was stormed, and people died. In one evening, a reputation built over 50 years collapsed in the eyes of millions of genuinely neutral Americans. His phone stopped ringing. He left the White House with, "Goodbye. We will be back in some form." Then came the machinery of the comeback, and this is where it gets interesting. Step 1, martyrdom. Trump reframed every indictment, every raid, every charge as evidence of a system targeting not just him, but the Americans who voted for him. They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I'm just standing in the way. That line lands differently when there are genuinely 91 charges hanging over you. Step 2, merchandise the persecution. Within 90 minutes of his Georgia arrest booking, his team had merch on sale featuring his mugshot, in which Trump stared directly into the camera like he was posing for a magazine cover. In 2 days, over $7 million. For context, it takes Taylor Swift's team nearly 2 weeks to hit comparable numbers on a major launch. Step 3, counter-programming. He skipped the first Republican primary debate entirely, releasing a counter-interview with Tucker Carlson instead. During the 5th debate, he gave a live interview on a competing network at the exact same time slot. He won the primary with no real competition. Then came the assassination attempt. A bullet grazed his right ear during a rally in Pennsylvania. In the seconds after, bleeding, surrounded by Secret Service, Trump raised his fist. The photograph became one of the defining political images of the decade. T-shirts with the image and the word "fight" hit #1 on Amazon within hours. His most devoted supporters said God had spared him for a purpose. Trump understood the moment completely. He'd essentially borrowed the final piece of Ronald Reagan's mythology. Reagan survived a shooting too. Reagan also ran on Make America Great Again. He won in November, the 47th president, the second in American history to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Trump started when all media was print and radio. He conquered television, then the internet, then memes.
The 2016 wave was genuinely organic, and it was his. Then podcasts. His Rogan interview broke YouTube viewership records. His son Barron, a Gen Z kid, pushed him toward long-form audio. At 78, he was still adapting faster than the people trying to stop him. What hasn't changed is the rhetorical playbook. Nobody knows this better than me, used to preempt doubt before it forms. It'll be so easy, applied to everything, triggering the specific emotional response of relief. Every Trump speech eventually arrives at the same destination. This will be the golden age of America. Kennedy told Americans that going to the moon would be hard, and they should do it anyway. Trump's promise runs in the opposite direction. The best days are behind you. The system stole them. Vote for me and I'll give them back. It's a formula that's worked for Reagan, for Milley, and for strongmen across a century of Democratic politics. In 1988, Oprah Winfrey asked him directly if he'd ever run for president.
"I think I'd win," he said. "I've never lost before." Nobody took it seriously. Here's the most honest summary I can give you of Donald Trump. Two people can watch the same interview and reach completely opposite conclusions. One sees a narcissist, a braggart, a man who lies reflexively and bullies instinctively. The other sees someone who does what he says, fights harder than anyone expects, and refuses to stay down no matter what the circumstances. Both of them are looking at the same person. He was born into money. He became a billionaire anyway. His speeches are full of exaggerations and outright falsehoods. He also has real accomplishments and real supporters with real grievances. And he's still in the White House right now. There aren't many people worth studying in this kind of detail while they're still alive. Trump is one of them.